Welcome into the Blogger Bowl. Dan is wearing the shirt that I was actually looking at buying, so I'm glad I didn't buy that one. Florida Phil is now moved on from corporate Phillies. Now Florida Phil has decided to join us. We're very lucky to have him. I myself am Matt Rooney. I'm wearing my purple. Unfortunately, Dan, it is a Washington shirt, but I wore it in support of TCU. That's why I got the zipper up. We have been, I don't want to say, we've been the opposite of spoiled. We've been, haunted with some bad playoff games and some blowout playoff games in the past in the semifinals. That was not the case at all this year. We got two absolute barn burners, and thank God I was at a wedding and couldn't watch nearly any of it other than the first half of TCU Michigan. Phil was very thankfully texting me updates throughout, and I think I had at one point 15 consecutive unresponded to text messages from Phil. But guys,
I also
what a day!
It was an amazing day. I have to shout out pessimistic Matt though.
Oh my God! Every time Michigan did anything good, I was like, "It's
Matt
over."
is my favorite Matt, because every time I text him something, he would just put in like 52-51 Michigan. It's going to happen. But I mean, you're just trying to reverse jinx yourself the entire time.
It's partially reverse jinx. When I had my phone in my pocket in certain ways, good things were happening for TCU. So I tried to put my phone back in my pocket the same way every time. But no, when they got the ball back and drove down where they could have gone up and made it a 3-score game, had to settle for the field goal to make it 51-38. I was absolutely convinced that was going to be a 52-38 win. Dan, enough about us celebrating and relishing in Michigan's triumphant loss. What did you think of that? We'll start there. Let's go in order. Let's start chronological order. What a game! What did you think of it?
Yeah, so New Year's Eve is a tricky time for America. Not all of us are blessed to have a small child, which makes going out on New Year's Eve at any capacity difficult the way Phil does. So I had to pick and choose my spot, and so I end up going to dinner, like scheduling a reservation for dinner, basically at the start of the second half of the Michigan TCU game. So I actually missed all of it until the last couple of drives where Jim Harbaugh suddenly didn't understand how to use it. I'll get into my deeper thoughts of this later because I did go back and watch the second half later. But I'm pretty convinced, because it also happened in the Texas game, that nobody in college football understands that until the last 2 minutes, the clock doesn't stop when you go out of bounds. I'm just convinced. Nobody knows that the 100%. Clock doesn't stop.
It's one of the most forgotten rules in college football.
Yeah. They're just letting time tick and tick and tick when they're down a couple of scores, and it's crazy. Now, that said, I kind of wonder if it doesn't seem very Michigan-like, but part of me wonders if they kind of didn't respect TCU enough going into this game, because I don't understand why Michigan calls Philly special on 4th and goal from the 1 if they're not utterly convinced that this is a team that just is not going to be able to stop them during the game. I know TCU forced the fumble on the next one, or the one
where the next one even like a fullback dive.
It wasn't. Yeah, they went to fullback.
And then the one with the fumble.
Yeah, you've seen it in football. I don't know why though. It feels like the last month or so across college and the NFL, teams have realized not only does the QB sneak work, but the QB sneak where you motion the tight end right behind the quarterback and push works. That works.
Yeah. They did a third.
Not 9 times out of 10.
A third and 3 sneak.
Yeah, with that exact thing.
But it's Matt. It's been crazy the last few weeks.
Why hand the ball to your fullback, who I know Michigan uses the fullback more than most schools, and that's fine. No problem with that. But the amount of times outside of Army and Navy and Air Force that fullback is actually taking regular handoffs is very, very rare. And it's just they get down to the goal line on their first 2 drives and just go away from what has worked for them and what got them there all year. And part of me does believe, Dan, that you were talking about it. It was hard. It would have to be hard for them to not be slightly looking past TCU, and at least as a coaching staff, you would never let the players know, but they're kind of already starting a game plan for Georgia, because Georgia ate their lunch last year, and they're a better team than they were last year. Georgia's not as good of a team as they were last year. They want that one bad. And with everybody talking about how, TCU's just happy to be there and Michigan's going to beat them by 3 or 4 touchdowns, it would probably be pretty difficult to not at least start thinking about that and maybe get a little bit out over your head.
Yeah, well, I think part of it was, and that's kind of my next point. So I have several points, I guess. First and foremost, I don't mind giving the ball to the fullback. At least they ran the ball on the goal line. That's a totally understandable thing. It was it's a fumble. It was a freak thing. I think you run that play 100 times, you fumble it 4 or 5 times. It's just one of those freak things. But you have a turnover on downs, you have a literal fumble, and then you have 2 pick sixes, which ultimately is the difference in that game if you're Michigan. But they definitely, I think, went into that game with the idea they were going to bully TCU. And like, I wanted people to kind of understand this is like Big 12 football is not what you remember Big 12 football being in the era of like Robert Griffin III. Like, these aren't offenses that are going to just throw the ball up and down the field. It is a conference that is a lot tougher than people want to give it credit for being. It's not the SEC. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's the SEC or anything like that. That is a tough football team. That is a football team that, like, my favorite saying in the world right now for whatever reason is they want the smoke. Like TCU, they are not afraid. They are playing with house money, and what they do with that 3-3-5 defense is they bring guys from angles that you're not used to seeing. It's not a defense. It's like, in some ways, it's almost like playing an option offense for a lot of these SEC and Big Ten teams, because you just don't see a defense like this very often. Ole Miss ran some of it this year, but okay, you have the 3 down linemen instead of 4, but you're bringing guys from all different angles, all different places, from the secondary, from the linebacker spot where you might not traditionally see it. I mean, D. Winters was all over the field, and havoc plays was the name of the game for TCU in this. They had like double-digit tackles for loss, 4 sacks. We talked about the pick sixes. We talked about the fumble. I mean, this was a team that every time, also, by the way, that Michigan seemed to be creeping back into this game, they found an answer for it too. Like, they made some big plays when they needed to. When Michigan started to they had one great drive after Michigan got it to within a couple of points, and then the long touchdown to Quentin Johnston. Like, this is a team that has a lot of intestinal fortitude in these tight situations. I mean, they were molded by it, right? Like, this was a team that played tight games all year. So there's not really a situation that you can throw at TCU that they're not going to be prepared for.
Also, what's interesting when I see matchups like this, and I think before it used to be, it's like when you'd have a Big Ten team play the Pac-12 in the Chip Kelly era, they're just not used to necessarily like the fast style of play. They're used to more like a slow pace, especially with a dominant defense like Michigan. And so it was very clear in the second half that they just got absolutely gassed. And not just like on the D-line. It was the D-line. It was the linebackers. It was the secondary. And, you're right, Dan. It's kind of a weird mix of like TCU playing a mix of bully ball and like classic Big 12 football, where they were like moving very fast, but they were also just pounding the ball down Michigan's throat, which was just a delight to watch, because it was clear that Michigan just wasn't prepared for that type of, not necessarily even like playing speed, because they'd seen that playing speed before, but just like the tempo of the game. And it was clear that they, were probably preparing for a slower-ish paced Georgia team, and thought that they could line up on defense and do what they've done all year and shut down the run, and then have their secondary and D-line get to Duggan, which happened right away at the game. So I think they probably felt really confident, even after their first 2 drives, they had mistakes. Like, hey, we've got their number. We're not going to keep making these mistakes. And they kept making those mistakes.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, finish, Dan.
I was just going to say, like, Michigan gets the 54-yard run from Edwards on the first play of the game, which was just as much about I can't remember if it was a linebacker or a DB, got a little bit too overzealous and wanted to blow up the tight end who was lead blocking instead of trying to make a play on it. You eliminate that play, and I know every play happens, but if you eliminate that play, Michigan 3.38 yards per carry the rest of the game. Like, against that offensive line, that's one of the best, if not the best in the country, for TCU to really stand up over the balance of that game and make play after play after play to really limit what Michigan did in the run game was spectacular. And like you said, that Michigan was better this year than they were last year. I mean, are we entirely convinced the quarterback? No, JJ McCarthy made some really nice. JJ McCarthy actually, over the course of that game, JJ McCarthy did everything that you like kind of come to expect from JJ McCarthy. There were some really good throws. There were some really good moments. There were like the first pick six, he was way late on. I don't remember if it was a bad throw, if he was late on the second one. Like
a little bit of both.
It was JJ McCarthy, the full JJ McCarthy experience there. He goes 20 for 34, 343 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Matt, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to talk about how, you were talking about the TCU run game, and I was incredibly impressed when Miller goes down early and DeMarcado comes in and, picks up exactly where he left off, and you don't miss a beat at all whatsoever. But I think this game for Michigan showed, the running effort was a lot like the Ohio State game. Like, majority, like, they were kind of shut down, limited, with the exception of some home runs that they hit. And that's, Donovan Edwards is a very good running back, but I think this showed how much they miss Blake Corum, because Blake Corum is really that every down back that can go get you 4, 5, 6. Whereas Donovan Edwards, he hits the hole, and if he hits the hole clean, like you saw in the first play, you saw against Ohio State, he can be gone. Where I think Blake Corum is a little bit better at making, plays where an offensive line might not block perfect, getting, the extra 2 or 3 yards out of that because he is so shifty. I think they missed Blake Corum, and obviously they missed Blake Corum in this game. He's a Heisman Trophy finalist. Stays healthy, probably wins the Heisman Trophy. Like, they missed him in this one because Donovan Edwards, as good as he is really that home run hitter, and they didn't have that complement to him, the guy that can go out and get them 4, 5, 6 on, a play where there's one blocking assignment or two.
Yeah, kind of just looking through some of the advanced stats from this game. Michigan had 9 explosive plays to TCU's 4. Makes sense. The game state dictated that they were chasing the game most of the time. When you take out the explosive plays, Michigan's EPA per play was negative 0.56. So they were basically expected to lose over half a point for every play where they didn't have an explosive play. So you talked about the Ohio State game. That's what made me kind of look it up. It was the same thing here. Like, without the big plays, the Michigan offense was relatively inefficient throughout the course of the day. And like Joe Gillespie, he's a name that you're going to hear for head coaching jobs going forward. I don't know if he has any aspirations bigger than TCU to maybe be a defensive coordinator somewhere, but their defensive game, I know they gave up a ton of points in that game, but, for the lack of physicality or the lack of size to match up with Michigan, the TCU defense was great. And you just brought up, you brought up
plays.
Yeah, you brought up DeMercado. DeMercado had 17 carries, 150 yards, and a touchdown. Duggan, he only had 225 passing yards. He had 2 touchdowns. He had a couple of interceptions. And that's the other thing, too. Like, I said it earlier, like, the pick sixes, the 2 turnovers in the red zone, inside the 10, inside the 5, really, for Michigan, like, were brutal. But TCU also had a couple of very costly turnovers in this game. So, like, the turnover margin wasn't as lopsided as it may appear. However, Michigan certainly gave away 14 points on their side and then gave up 14 points. So that's like basically 28 points on special teams, or, at least maybe, 20 because of 2 field goals, if you want to go that far and say you think it held there. Nevertheless, just absolutely fantastic from TCU, and they just continue to play with house money. Do we want to move on to the main event? Because with all due respect, these were 2 great teams, but man.
But there's reason to believe the second one was the national championship game.
Yeah.
We've been waiting. We wanted to see this matchup all year, and maybe our faith wavered in that Ohio State was the second best team in college football this year. But throughout most of the season, we thought that these 2 teams were the best 2 teams in college football. With all due respect to Alabama, who didn't play like a top 4 team until their bowl game, these were probably the 2 best teams in college football this year, even if Ohio State had their ups and their downs, and obviously the loss. 42-41 in a game that spanned over 2 days, over a Ohio State losing on a field goal that spanned 2 days, because I believe when the kick went up in the air, it was still 2022. And when it sailed way left, it was 2023. My fiance kind of stumbled out of our bedroom at 11:59 being like, why aren't you watching the ball drop right now? I'm like standing
football
up television. So I have a few overarching thoughts on this. Are you guys familiar with the butterfly effect?
Oh, yeah.
Not the movie, but like the concept of the butterfly effect.
I haven't seen the movie. If you think Phil hasn't seen an Ashton Kutcher film.
It's just wondering, like, so for me, it's kind of sitting here wondering how different things might have been if we're talking about plays that consumed inches and like a yard here or there had gone different. Like, what happens if CJ Stroud gets another yard of air under that throw in the back of the end zone and doesn't put Marvin Harrison Jr. in jeopardy on a ball he almost caught, by the way? It shouldn't have stood. It should have been illegal. It should have been illegal touching. Nevertheless, if that ball just sails out of the end zone and he doesn't take that hit, how does that game change? If Brock Bowers isn't an alien and isn't able to stretch for that first down, which was originally called a 4th down stop, how does that change the outcome of that game? And if Kirby Smart's timeout is just half second longer later, and the referee doesn't grant it, and they allow a fake punt, which, by the way, there were 12 men on the field for Ohio State, and it didn't seem like any official caught that, but there were 12 men on the field for Ohio State. If they're allowed to get away with that play and it counts, how does that change the game? Like, overarching. My other thought on this before I let you guys give your thoughts, and then I'll go deeper into it later. I came into this game with a healthy level of either disrespect or questioning for Ryan Day, for CJ Stroud, and even Stetson Bennett. And I come away very impressed with all 3 of those guys. Ryan Day, I think, coached a hell of a game until very, very late. I'm not even going to fault him for the punt because I'm an analytics guy. I love numbers, but like all of the nerds on Twitter who are like pushing up their glasses on their nose being like, he shouldn't have punted on that 4th and 1. Like, I don't mind that. The play calling late, and like I said, I'll go into that a little bit later. That was a little questionable, but I thought he kicked Kirby Smart's ass. I think for the balance of that game. I think in the run up to the game, in the prep for that game, CJ Stroud, this was what we wanted to see from him all year. CJ Stroud played his best game at Ohio State. He ran the ball effectively, which is something he's never done. He made some great throws. And Stetson Bennett, you can say what you want about him, but big time players make big plays in big games, and he finds a way to get the job done. It's just what he does. It's infuriating when there's nothing logical about a guy who's undersized, his arm's not great, and he thinks he's Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes in terms of arm strength, and he's not. And he comes and makes just crazy throws, but he gets the job done.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, going into the fourth quarter, has there ever been a more uncomfortable 14-point lead going into a fourth quarter? I think it was a 14-point game going into the fourth quarter, and there was not a single person that was like, all right, maybe I'll go to bed. It's, everyone was thinking like, this is going to come down to the wire, simply because it's, again, as you mentioned, Stetson Bennett doing Stetson Bennett things. And then again, I thought Ryan Day was going to blow it more than he did. I guess I thought he was going to crumble a little bit more. I think when it comes down to it, there's Daniel go into it, because I saw some of your tweets about what should have happened and some stuff, which was a great breakdown. But when I looked at it, I was just kind of like, man, if Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't go down, I don't think this game. I think the game is different, because when you call a game differently when he's in the game, and he was the best player on the field. I mean, you could toss a coin between him and Stroud being best players on the field, but when you lose that, it's tough. And then even without that, you don't have their top running back. You don't have Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like, this Ohio State team, I think would have. It's kind of I feel for Ohio State fans a little bit. It's not something I'd ever say. This is kind of a like, what if?
We'll keep your secret.
Right? It's like, if you're healthy, you're healthy. I think you win this game by a score or two, and it looks like you're rolling to a national championship. But instead, you blew a 14-point lead and missed a field goal to go to the national championship in a game that you'd be favored by 14 points in.
Yeah, real quick before you go, Matt, real quick, just in the interest of fairness, I agree. Marvin Harrison was the biggest loss in this game. They also lost Cade Stover, their starting tight end. Georgia lost Darnell Washington very early in the game, and Ladd McConkey was never healthy. And supposedly Brock Bowers was dealing with some kind of illness, which is why he didn't look 100% in that game. So there were injuries and illness and whatever on both sides of this game, just to be clear and fair on that. But I still agree. Marvin Harrison and CJ Stroud, in my opinion, were the two best players on the field in that game. Matt, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. It's weird that I come away more impressed with the team that lost. And I was, after the Ohio State Michigan game, Phil, I don't remember if you were on with us for that one or not, but like Dan, I could not have been more critical or gone after Ryan Day and Ohio, more so Ryan Day than Ohio State, but the team much harder. But they silenced a whole lot of doubts for me. This is really the first time for me in like a really, really big spot and a big moment that team coached by Ryan Day came out and played and looked really played to their highest potential, because they've always had that potential since he's gotten there, since before he's been there. They always have the potential to be the most talented team in college football, up there with Alabama, up there with Georgia. And ever since he took over, we didn't really see that. We finally saw that from them. I've been calling on this from CJ Stroud for 2 years now. For as talented as he is, you never really see him, put the team on his back in the big moments. And I think he did that alongside Marvin Harrison Jr. There's nothing wrong with having a stud wide receiver and relying on him, because he made a bunch of throws. And kind of will here, like, as much as in hindsight, even at the time, if you're yelling at the TV, like, hey man, like, don't settle for the 50-yarder, like, throw it a couple times. I get getting a little bit more conservative with Harrison not in. Obviously, Smith and Jigba hasn't been there all year. The tight end's not there. Travion Williams isn't there. You still trust your offensive line to maybe get you a couple yards on the ground, and that's much safer. Like, I get the thought process. Had everybody been healthy, and had Marvin Harrison Jr. still been healthy, and they run the football and decide not to take a shot to him down the field, then I'm critical of him. And in hindsight, yeah, was it the wrong decision? Sure. But going back in the moment with him not there, and they have a pretty good kicker in Noah Ruggles. Obviously, he shanked the hell out of that field goal, but like, he's a pretty darn good kicker. And 50 for a college kicker, like a good one, is a lot, but it's not something that's unreasonable. I mean, what's his name? Moody from Michigan hit the 59-yarder. Like, it's not asking him to hit from 60. I get it. It was the wrong decision, but like, I can't be as critical of him for that call as I have been on several decisions, basically just the entire way he coached the Michigan game.
So I don't think so. I initially was like he got conservative. After watching it back, I don't think he got conservative at all. I don't mind running the ball. They had 2 timeouts. I don't mind running the ball once on first down. That's fine.
Yeah.
It was the second down and the third down play where I really questioned what they were doing, because we've talked about it here and there. Like, at that point, you don't have Marvin Harrison Jr. Jackson Smith-Njigba hasn't played in months. Trayvon Henderson's hurt. Mayan Williams got body shamed during the game by Chris Fowler.
That was
Chris
really
Fowler
weird.
basically called him fat during the game. Dallin Hayden's okay, but nothing special. So and Kate Stover got hurt. So basically, at that point, your only reliable skill position player is Egbuka. At that point, on second down, they run a slant with Xavier Johnson, and what the play design was just weird to me, because what they do is they send Egbuka on basically a clear out route and then run the slant with Johnson on Keely Ringo. And it was there. They just didn't connect on it. It wasn't necessarily a bad play call. The execution wasn't great. But my question on that one is, why is there not like an out route or something towards the sideline instead of just having Egbuka run up the field and not really run a competitive route? Why aren't you trying to get him out to the sideline one-on-one? They're not playing press coverage. They're not really defending you tight. They're trying to not give up a big play there. I don't understand why Egbuka's not the guy you're going to there. And then on the third down play, again, if you watch it closely, Stroud, his first read is Johnson. He looks to Johnson, and at that point, the pass rush is coming, and he's got to bail and just get rid of the football. I don't understand why, with the game on the line, with a chance to get positive yardage with a kicker who has been reliable, also, though, however, had never attempted a 50-yard field goal in his 2 years at Ohio State. I don't understand in that moment. Yeah, and in that moment, I don't understand why you're not targeting your only reliable skill position player that you have left available in Egbuka. Again, if Georgia is playing press coverage, if they're doubling him, if they're trying to make sure that you don't get him the ball, I understand that. That wasn't the case. There were opportunities to call routes to get him the ball. So I don't think he necessarily got conservative. Darrell Royal, the legendary Texas coach whose name is on the stadium, he was known for his quips. And one of his most famous quotes was, "Dance with who brung you." Basically, run the players, lean on the players that got you to where you are in that moment. And to me, Emeka Egbuka was their best option to try to get the ball to. I don't understand why they weren't trying to throw him the ball late in that game to get a few more yards and try to kick the game-winning field goal. Ruggles is a good kicker. Snap was good. The hold was good. He just shanked it. Shit happens. Like, I feel bad for the kid because I don't think anyone's like come after him or anything, but like he was put in a tough spot. And he missed it. Like, it happens. Like, good kickers miss field. Like Justin Tucker, maybe the greatest field goal kicker of all time, misses kicks. Like, it happens. And yeah, Ohio State fans are a special breed of human. They don't take jokes very well. It's very enjoyable. It is very enjoyable to watch Ohio State lose most of the time. And I actually came out of this game feeling bad for Ohio State, which is not a thing I ever thought I was going to say.
I don't think I agree with you. I've never felt bad for him until that moment.
Yeah, and a part of me was glad it was a 50-yard field goal. If it was like 42, it's like then that kid his head gets put on a stake. But the fact that it was over 50, even though it was like 47, right? That 3 yards makes him not be the
number 5 being there makes it.
Yeah, it's the psychology of it. Is it in his head at that point that it's like, oh, this is a 50? Does he even know that? Like, I don't know, but like you can't help but wonder.
Should have told him it was a 49-yarder.
Exactly.
Dan, I'm really with you in terms of going back to the kind of the second and third down play call, where it's not like Georgia came out in press coverage, right? They came out in relatively soft coverage. And going back and watch it, they rolled into a little bit tighter coverage. But you got to have your first option be your best receiver. In that situation, you can't take a sack. You trust your coverage a little bit. You check your first read, which should have been Egbuka. Check your first read for a quick hitch 4 or 5 yard route. If there's time, you quickly peek to your second read and then you throw it out of bounds. It just didn't really make sense. And you wonder if it almost looked like the 2 wide receivers, Egbuka and the other guy, Xavier Johnson. Like they almost got switched. They were switched around. It's like Egbuka should have been the primary read and he wasn't. I don't know if that was because of hurry up or something like that, but in that situation, I think you looked on the third down, or maybe no. I think the first down right after the rush. This is the one thing which I wish. I think looking back, this is the really the hindsight point is after Stroud's rush, Georgia's on their heels. They're not even lined up, and Ohio State's going quick, which I understand trying to get a quick rush in that situation, but don't take the ball out of Stroud's hand in that case. Like he's been running, he has the hot hand. Georgia's on their heels. You could definitely chunk for a quick 5-yard slant, hitch, etc., something in that. Like that should have been there. But again, hindsight's 2020, so just frustrating if you're an Ohio State fan, and luckily I'm not.
Hell, you could have even ran QB draw at that point with how well Straw's with. If he takes that, quick little, not even 3-step, just a quick little drop step, and makes it look like he's going to throw, they're biting on that every time. I don't think anybody thinks you're calling QB draw with CJ Stroud with how well he's run the ball and how athletic he is. It probably works.
Yeah, and just I guess my final point on the game, because we've spent a lot of time talking about the team that lost and not the team that won, I think you do have to give Georgia a lot of credit in just the way that they did not, like, they have, and it's a cliche, it's cheesy, I understand it, but they do have that heart of a champion where there was nothing for them that they could not overcome in that game. Like, they get very fortunate when the DB falls down and Bennett has the wide open touchdown pass to get them to within 7 or to get them close or whatever. But like, we have this like misconception of Stetson Bennett, which is game manager. Everyone's kind of, oh, he's a game manager. Georgia has never needed him to do much of anything. And that couldn't be further from the truth with him. Like, this is not a game manager quarterback at all. This is a gunslinger. And I said it earlier, like, this is a guy who is going to make some throws that you're like, dude, you're not Josh Allen. Like, you're not Justin Herbert. You don't have that arm. Why are you trying that? But part of that is what makes him good. Also being like 30 years old, but that's neither here nor there. Like, he is a guy who, all three of the throws on their game-winning touchdown drive were immaculate. Like, he put the ball right where he needed to put them. The second one over the top of the defense was awesome. Like, that's a throw that you would expect any elite quarterback to make, and he made that. The touchdown throw was spectacular. Like, should this guy have been a Heisman finalist? No, but this guy, once again, when his team needed to, made the big throws. And like, all of this hokey, folksy crap about him being the mailman, the walk-on, whatever, he's earned a lot of the credit that he has gotten because he has continued to come up big time and time again.
Well, you actually misspoke. He has an NIL deal as the milkman.
Milkman, sorry, not the mailman. The milkman.
He was the mailman, and then rebranded with an NIL deal with Big Milk as the milkman, which I think is awesome.
Oh. So I know, Phil, we've got to get you out of here in just a couple of minutes. So real quick, we have about 2.5 minutes till we have a semi-hard out at 30 minutes. What are your thoughts on the national title game real quick? And we decided we were going to do a prize picks entry as a group. So what do you expect to happen on Monday night, and what is your prize picks entry?
I am expecting points, honestly, because I think TCU is going to score. They're going to be super aggressive. And I think there's going to be times where even if they get down, 12, 13, even up to like 17 points, I think there's going to be situations where they score big and score quick. I think Georgia's defense is going to get a little bit tired during that game, and they are going to be playing on their heels a little bit at times, simply because, you have to look back and see what TCU just did against one of the best defenses in the country, right? There's no way that they go into this game thinking we're just going to dominate the way that we've been dominant. And Georgia has also been got like plenty of times this season. This isn't the wild, dominant Georgia team that we've seen. So in this case, I'm looking at the total of the over. And part of me is just hoping for that because we've been blessed with the best bowl season in recent memory. So, if this over's hitting, I think it's going to be a good game. Because I think if Georgia is getting up, they're going to try to control the ball. And try to slow things down on their end, where I think the time of possession is going to skew wildly to Georgia. But I don't think that's going to necessarily have an indication in this game. So I'm looking at points. I like Georgia to win this game simply because they've been there. And does TCU's magic kind of run out here? You don't know. You hope for the Cinderella run. And if the Cinderella run does happen and they end up winning, it's going to be one of the best stories in sports in recent memory. Honestly, if you look at the talent distribution between the two teams, it's not even close. If you look at the portal acquisitions between the two teams, it's not even close. And so this will be, I think, probably the largest gap. And I'm just going to say this, I don't know if it's true, probably the largest gap in like blue chip ratio between two teams. I don't know if in a championship game, but if they win. So my prize pick is going to be TCU's punter. What's his name? Under 4.5 punts. Jordan Sandy.
Love it.
Under 4.5 punts. And part of me is just rooting for this pick because if they're punting under 4.5 times, they're probably losing, but it means that Sonny Dykes is absolutely going for it. And I think that he's going to take that attitude into this game. Like, they can go into this game, Max Duggan and the whole team should be able to play loose, should be able to play with kind of like this we have nothing to lose mentality. Last game of the season, can't hold anything back. So I'm just rooting for like a shootout because we've been blessed with the best college football bowl season ever, and I want it to keep going. So that's my hope and a prayer that we're going to do points and under punts.
I completely wish I had remembered this until just this moment, but I know you got to go. So real quick before you go, score prediction, not the game Monday, but on Sunday, South Dakota State, North Dakota State. Give me a score prediction.
I'm going to go South Dakota State 34, North Dakota State 27.
Ooh, so you think they're going to cover that? Number's actually been on the move towards South Dakota State. I think it was up to 5.5 today. So
I'm a huge fan of South Dakota State's running back and quarterback Mark Gronowski from Naperville Central. So an Illinois kid going up there. And North Dakota State's defense has looked vulnerable this year, and they also don't have that dominant quarterback. So I think South Dakota State's a much better team. But you're just curious if they get the kind of cold feet of, can we actually win the big one against North Dakota State, who's, won everything under the sun the last 12 years.
I'm just not betting against North Dakota State.
I am simply because then we can say Holy Cross Crusaders, they're their best team in the country. Second best team in the country.
Second best.
Well, Phil, we appreciate you taking some time from your vacation in Florida to come pop in. Best of luck. We appreciate having you all year, and we'll talk soon.
Go Frogs.
Later, Phil.
See you, Phil. All right, Matt. So for those of you who might not have this, just might be listening, Georgia's a 12.5-point favorite. The total currently 62.5. Those numbers are via FanDuel. What do you expect to see on Monday night?
I mean, I'm with Phil on the over. The total here, the spread, I should say. I'm going back and forth in between. Like, I'm kind of leaning TCU because I think the double digit says a lot. But for me, this is going to come down to like similar breakdown of the Michigan game. We talked about Michigan kind of being like Georgia light in the way that they kind of play football and how what they do well and what they don't do well. TCU is going to have a very similar formula to the Michigan game. They're going to try and make havoc, cause havoc plays on defense. They're going to take a ton of shots on offense. They're going to try to be able to run the ball because they have to. But like, they're going to go in there and just kind of take their shots. And I hope they kind of play with no fear because that's what got them there. That's beat Michigan. I expect, I don't want to quite say chaos, but a little bit of controlled chaos because I think Georgia's a little more polished than Michigan. So I don't think we'll see the pick sixes quite to the extent and the turnovers that we saw from Georgia, that we saw from Michigan. But like, I expect to see some fireworks and some big plays. So I'm with Phil on the over here. I'm staying away from the spread, at least for now. That might change if we get close to game time and it starts to move a little bit one way or another. But I'm just looking for an over. I think we see some fireworks in this one.
Yeah, I gave out the over on brown bag bets on Tuesday. There were still a couple books where it was 62. This got up to 63, then bet back down a little bit. I'm kind of I think we're all kind of in agreement in that the assessment of we expect to see scoring. I will say some of the injuries are a little bit concerning. Obviously, Kendry Miller, obviously Darnell Washington.
Do we have an update on Kendry Miller yet? Do we know?
He says he's questionable. There's no reason for TCU to say anything. So we don't know what officially it is. It was a knee injury. He said he's going to be fine. We'll see. Georgia does not give up anything on the ground anyway. So it's kind of like an interesting situation. So my thought process is this, like, TCU, they did turn the ball over a couple of times, but they rely so much on those havoc plays. And when they are not getting those havoc plays, their defense has been very gettable. They've given up a lot of explosive plays over the balance of the season. I would expect that to continue with Georgia. I don't think TCU's defense is going to be good enough to keep Georgia down for large chunks of this game. They will be able to generate some stops the way they did against Michigan. I don't think they're going to be able to generate a ton of stops. On the other side of the ball, I think there's some things that Ohio State did that TCU is going to be able to replicate. First and foremost, while Max Duggan is not the passer that CJ Stroud is, CJ Stroud, once again, is one of the elite passers in college football. The fact that CJ Stroud was able to take advantage of Georgia with his legs should bode well for a player like Max Duggan, who is a much more polished, much better runner, much more accomplished runner anyway than CJ Stroud is. I think his ability to get out and get away from the rush and evade the rush for a Georgia team who has struggled all year to get the quarterback on the ground, like, their sack rate is in the close to the down near the hundreds. They just did not generate a lot of sacks this year. So I think he'll be able to run. I also think we saw like Marvin Harrison Jr. had some success. Georgia was able to take him away after the first quarter. Then Egbuka had some success. Like Quentin Johnston, while Marvin Harrison, in my opinion, is the best wide receiver in college football, like I would say Jordan Addison is probably, like, with all respect to Jalen Hyatt, who had an amazing year, like I would say Jordan Addison is the only other wide receiver in college football other than Marvin Harrison that I would say like I would maybe lean towards taking over Quentin Johnston. Like that's how good he is. They're going to be able to get some mismatches. Like Keely Ringo struggled mightily in coverage. If he's one-on-one with Keely Ringo, there's going to be some opportunities to get him the ball. If not, they've got a ton of guys who are very, very good at the skill position player. Their receiver group is pretty deep. And here's the thing too, like if Miller's healthy, you can make the argument that going into this game, if Kendre Miller, let's say, is about 90% or better, you can make the argument that at the beginning of the Ohio State-Georgia game, and then especially once Marvin Harrison Jr. got hurt, TCU's skill position group is deeper than what Ohio State had available in that game. At 100% full strength with Stover and Smith and Jigba and Harrison and Mayan Williams completely healthy and not overweight according to Chris Fowler and Travion Henderson, I'm taking that Ohio State skill group. No JSN, Harrison about halfway through or early third quarter. He goes out, Stover out early. No Travion Henderson. Like this TCU skill group is very, 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 very good and probably unappreciated by people who don't watch him. Emmy DeMarcado, like you mentioned earlier, he had a fantastic game against Michigan. Now they're not going to be able to run the ball on Georgia. Nobody's been able to run the ball on Georgia consistently. They need to be able to use it a little bit here and there to maybe take some of the pressure off of Max Duggan. They also need to try to stay ahead of the chains as best as possible. Georgia's defense has been gettable on early downs and has been damn near just like impenetrable on late downs. Georgia, the other thing is Georgia's like the times when Georgia has given up big plays, it's usually been because other teams are chasing the game. So like some of their numbers might be a little bit misleading from that standpoint, but just like everything points to there being point. And even if it's like, I'm kind of like, man, double digits is a lot to lay here, but there's a possibility we just watch the two best teams in college football play in the Peach Bowl and that this is going to be a coronation more than it is a competitive game over 4 quarters. So I do think there's a possibility Georgia wins by 14, 17, 21 points somewhere. I think that is a possibility. So I don't want to touch the spread, but like if you were to tell me this game was going to be like 42-28, I'd absolutely believe that. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, I like the over here. The other prop, and this kind of rolls into my prize picks. A prop that I kind of got talked into in a chat with some people that I've kind of thought about today. So right now at FanDuel, and you can price shop this and see where you get the best price. So Max Duggan's passing touchdowns is set at 1.5, and I'm going to go give me just half a second here to bring up the passing props here for Max Duggan. Max Duggan, player passing TDs. Max Duggan, over 1.5 passing touchdowns, plus 106, under is minus 140. So my thing is this. TCU's team total in this game is 24.5. So that's suggesting that they're going to score 3 touchdowns in this game. I don't think they're going to have a lot of success running the ball. Now they might end up in situations where they're getting short touchdown runs at the goal line, and that might be where you end up with a little bit of bad luck in this situation. But I really think if they're going to have success in this game, it's going to be through the air. So if I can get plus money at the over 1.5, I would lean towards that as being something that I really, really like. So that's a player prop that I like. Now, unfortunately, you can't just get the 1.5 passing touchdowns on Prize Picks. It's passing, I think it's passing and rushing, and maybe they throw on receiving. I don't know. But you just search passing and rushing touchdowns. It's set at 2. For Max Duggan. I'll play it. I think it's a push territory is very likely, but there are not a ton of options, so that's the one that I'm going to play.
Yeah, I like a Duggan prop. Can you do on Prize Picks? Can you do multiple props to the same player?
I don't think so. I didn't
think so either. I'm not going to go with Duggan, but the one prop I liked was over 261.5 pass plus rush yards, because I don't think their traditional running game is going to work very well for them, because no one's traditional running game works very well against Georgia. So I think Max Duggan's legs in the passing game are going to be an asset, because they have all year, and they're going to have to get creative with ways to, run the football and keep Georgia on their toes. And I think getting Max Duggan as involved as possible is a way to do that. He had 50 something against Michigan. He had like 110 against Kansas State in the Big 12 championship game. So obviously he can run the football. I'm leaning towards, for mine though, I'm going with Brock Bowers over 4.5 receptions. I think, you talk about dance with who brung you here, or Brock Bowers and Stetson Bennett, like that's been the duo for a long time. Jeez, it seems like a long time. It's been 2 years now. But I think in the biggest moments, especially with the injury uncertainties on the Georgia side, I think it's going to be Bennett looking for Bowers early and often. And I think that's a guy that you're going to see have a big game, because with the best teams, usually the best players come up big in the biggest game. So I like Brock Bowers to have himself a very productive national championship, and Stetson Bennett too. I think he's going to play very well. But I think in the actual game, it's going to be. We talked about it. I like TCU's first half in the Michigan game. They're going to have a similar first half. Maybe not have to be up 21-6 at halftime, but they're going to have to cause some havoc in the first half. They're going to have to force a turnover or two. They're going to have to convert on pretty much every chance that they get to score, and usually make those touchdowns if they're going to want to win this game and keep it competitive going to the fourth quarter.
Yeah, so kind of like thinking that through, I wonder if Griffin Kell under 1.5 made field goals is something worth considering, because TCU's not going to win this game with field goals. Now, maybe Sonny Dykes is just settling for field goals, and maybe he kicks.
I could see them though getting into spots early where it's like, hey, we forced this turnover, but now it's 4th and 11 from the 20. Like, we kind of have to kick that. You know what I mean?
Let me see. I'm bringing up Griffin Kell's game log right now.
I actually looked at the same thing earlier. It's pretty. 1.5 is about right for him.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games he's had more than one field goal this season. Okay. He had 2 against Iowa State, in a game in which they scored 62 points. He had 2 in the overtime loss to Kansas State in the Big 12 title game. He had 2 against Texas Tech and 2 against West Virginia, and then 3 against Oklahoma State, although guessing by the score, they got a stop in over. He kicked one in overtime. No, he didn't. He scored a touchdown. I don't know. Whatever. Nevertheless, because Oklahoma State settled for field goal.
We can make that a community entry, a fourth.
I don't know.
Fourth play, a prize picks entry with 2 special teams picks.
That's us being. Like, that's me probably overthinking some things a little bit here, because I don't think it's going to be a good policy for them to kick in this game. But
yeah,
maybe they're still going to do. Maybe they're still going to do it, and that's why. Who knows? Is there any news or anything this week in college football that we need to cover before we wrap this up? The only thing I can think of is a question I just thought of that it just popped into my brain just now, and it's this: is there a more unlikable coaching staff in college football than Jimbo Fisher, DJ Durkin, and Bobby Petrino?
It's going to be great to hate watch. I mean, we already kind of didn't like Texas A&M this year. I think the addition of Bobby Petrino makes them even worse. I don't think that. I know that. Maybe not from an actual coaching standpoint, from like a humanity standpoint. While he swore off them, last year for good, Jim Harbaugh's entertaining NFL offers again, so that's a thing. And I kind of think this seems like the year where he does it. He already has 2 teams that are very interested. That's one obviously to keep an eye on, because he flirts with them every year.
Yeah, last year that kind of felt like he was trying to get back some of the money he gave up to keep his job the first time. And last year flirting with the NFL was as much about trying to make sure he got his money as anything else. But like at this point, like, what are you going to do, man? Like, you go back to Michigan, you can't just keep – it just doesn't feel like they're ever going to get over that hump to me. It just kind of feels like even if they won, if they beat TCU –
it feels like this was their chance. Georgia, because, Ohio State found something. I don't know what exactly it was, but it seemed like they found something this college football playoff, and I think we're going to see a better, different Ohio State team next year, one that's more confident. And Ryan Day, I think, may have moved off, maybe taken a lead off third base. We'll see. If you leave Michigan now as Jim Harbaugh, I don't think anybody, Michigan fans included, are going to be for an NFL job. I don't think anybody's going to look down on him or be too you're going to be upset that he left, but I don't think anybody's going to swear off Jim Harbaugh and we hate Jim Harbaugh. Dude has turned around, taken what was a bad Michigan program and got them to more than national relevancy. He's gotten them to the college football playoff back-to-back years, granted 2 very disappointing losses. And while he may have some unfinished business here, he's got unfinished business in the pros too. And if the Denver Broncos are going to offer him an insane amount of money to come coach there, I mean, how do you not take it? Especially it used to be, college football was, you got to recruit, but you kind of have your assistants recruit and then you come in and you're the closer. Now with NIL, it's a whole different animal and you got to be way more on top of things. Whereas you go to the NFL, you got an answer to a GM, but you're Jim Harbaugh. You could probably negotiate for a little bit more power than most head coaches have. And you just get to go coach football. You get to go coach adults and be a head football coach and not have to worry if this 19-year-old who you're paying X amount of dollars this year is happy with the amount of snaps that he got with the ones in spring. Like that's I think it's inevitable within the next year or two that he's with an NFL team. I think now that we have rumors with the Broncos and the Panthers that he probably does it. But if you told me also that Michigan announced that he signed an extension that's Mel Tucker like, wouldn't totally shock me either. But it seems to me that with how often he's been flirting with them, that he's kind of looking to go back there and try and one up the Super Bowl loss he has to his brother.
Yeah, I mean, that's
not only did he lose to the Super Bowl, he lost to his brother. That's got to sting with how competitive the Harbaughs are.
Absolutely. Oh man. So before I wrap, I'll say this. I remember a lot of things about that night that the 49ers and the Ravens played in the Super Bowl. Back in those days, ESPN, they used to have they had two crews cut the Super Bowl highlight. Okay. One crew, and this was literally different groups of people, cut the Super Bowl highlight for SportsCenter, and one crew cut it for NFL Primetime. So a different person would cut the first half for each show, a different person would cut the fourth quarter for each show, and then the same person cut the third quarter for that show. Okay. We changed the policy at ESPN after that Super Bowl because I was the lucky schmuck who got to cut the third quarter of that Super Bowl for both shows the year that the power went out right after halftime.
That's fun.
Or right after the kickoff return for a touchdown or whatever it was. That was the year the power went out in the Super Bowl. I had to cut both versions of the third quarter of that highlight for both shows, and never again did we ever do one person cutting any portion of two different highlights of the Super Bowl. And I guess just on a sad note, I guess to bring it up because it was yesterday. Yesterday was the unfortunate anniversary of the passing of Stuart Scott. His read on it was him, Steve Levy, Trent Dilfer, and I think Keyshawn Johnson on the highlight for SportsCenter of that Ravens 49ers Super Bowl. Our highlight was, I want to say, 18 minutes long, and those four guys did one of the greatest highlight reads, maybe the greatest highlight read in the history of the world. So like when I think about Stuart Scott and I think about his legacy and things like that and stuff that I did that he worked on, that's one of the first things that comes up. I'm going to tell Matt a story off air about Stuart Scott that's not salacious, but it's very funny. And I don't want to tell it on air right now. But nevertheless, man, two more, I guess, if we count the FCS, but man, Monday we're done. It's a bummer.
Time flies, man.
Yeah.
It feels like not too long ago we were doing our conference preview.
Yeah, we were talking about
Bill picked Miami to go to the ACC championship game.
And then my Jayhawks cashed their regular season win total.
They're my most intriguing storyline.
I love how we do this every time I bring it up, and it never stops making me laugh.
But
it's been a great season. We thank everyone who's been riding with us, been commenting. It's a small crew, but we appreciate you. Don't know when we'll be back. Maybe we'll hop on and do a quick recap of the title game. I don't know. We'll see. I probably have to do it on Tuesday, I would think, and I'm not sure what I have to go on Tuesday. We'll see. Maybe we'll be back. Maybe not. Who knows?
We'll be back at some point. We're not getting any more college football people to come in here. We're the college football people. So
exactly, but it might be a while. Nevertheless, we appreciate you guys riding with us all year. We hope you guys enjoy the football. We hope you watch some of the FCS game on Sunday. I know it's up against the NFL, but please try to watch some of that. And we hope you really, really enjoy the national title game. Hopefully,
you got a prediction?
Georgia 41, TCU 28.
That was going to be strikingly similar to my prediction. I will go 42-31 Georgia.
I like it. So we like the over. I like Georgia to cover, but barely.
We both love Georgia. We both love the game to be right around that 12.
Maybe we should just play the Georgia team total over. Like maybe that's the look.
Ooh, I think that's a good bet. I like that.
I mean, it's probably, and the problem is it's probably 40, right? Well, no, 24 and 60. I can't do the math in my head. I'm not good at math like that.
We're not a math show. We're a football show.
We're not a math show. We're a football show. And on that note, we're going to wrap. We appreciate you all once again. So we appreciate you riding with us. For Phil, corporate /Florida /Arvols Phil. For Matt, I'm Dan. We will talk to you at some point soon.